Hello, this is Mr. Usher doing a recording for my half-credit class, so that's for either the 5th or the 8th period. These particular ones are going to be covering, psychotic and dissociative disorders, which were done, look at the calendar here, either on Friday the 27th, Tuesday the 31st. I forgot we had Memorial Day, but yeah, either Friday the 27th or Tuesday the 31st of May. Let me actually go ahead and change that really quick. But yes, these are on psychotic and dissociative disorders. Let me really quick try to give you a basic definition of what each of these terms mean. Both of these terms involve somebody who is not properly connected with reality, right? Which kind of, more profoundly most profoundly is probably like the biggest deal in mental illness, right? Yeah, you have extremes in mood, you have extremes in anxiety, you might be addicted to something, you might have an eating disorder, all kinds of stuff like that. But if your connection to reality is being damaged by your mental illness, that's some serious stuff, right? So, first, psychosis. Psychosis is probably the most commonly known break from reality. In fact, the most common psychotic disorder, schizophrenia, literally means split mind, by which they mean not multiple personalities, we'll get to that in a second, but instead a split from reality, right? So you're here, what's real is over there, that kind of a thing. With psychosis, though, in general, if you're having psychotic features, if you're having psychotic episodes, what that essentially means is that, you kind of have some extra stuff put on top of you, right? Put on top of your sense of reality. So, quick visual example here, right? Maybe I'm looking at my hand, right? I'm just looking at my hand. It's a normal hand. Nothing's going wrong with it. One second here. So normally I'd be looking at my hand, it's just a normal hand, but somebody with psychosis may be seeing this guy, I don't know, they're seeing this little devil face, so they see that and it's like terrifying to them, right? But, let's pretend, for the sake of this exercise, right, that the sticky note actually isn't there, or the face isn't actually there, the sticky note just represents the psychosis. So the psychosis is causing me to see this face in my hand that isn't really there, right? Maybe be terrified of it. That's what psychosis is, adding extra features onto your perception of reality, so that you're perceiving reality as having things in it that it doesn't have, right? So it's an extra thing, adding extra stuff to your perception of reality. So these usually come in one of two forms. There's hallucinations, right, which is where we have a perception of something in our minds without a corresponding sensation, right? So for example, if I snap, I hear that in my own ear. I hear the sound of the snap. It could be further away, closer, right? So I'm having a perception in my mind of a snapping sound because there's an actual sensation, an actual snap. My fingers, actually these fingers, right, they hit my hand very rapidly. That creates a flapping sound, and that creates sound waves that travel to my ear and are then processed by my brain. That's typically why we perceive things, why we have sensations of sound, sight, touch, smell, and taste, right? However, you could also hallucinate. You could have that perception even though there is no sensation. If I suddenly hear a snap and react to it, but nobody snapped, that's a hallucination. We all actually have occasionally tiny hallucinations, like maybe you thought you heard your name, or maybe you thought you saw somebody in the corner of your eye, but there was nobody there. Those are just minor hallucinations. If they start to dominate your life, probably is a psychotic disorder. So that's psychosis, that's hallucinations. Delusions are when you have kind of exaggerated beliefs that aren't really based in any kind of reality, right? So this is different from like when somebody has like a religious or spiritual belief. If you believe in Jesus Christ as your savior, if you believe in Allah or Hashem or whatever conception of God you have, that's not a delusion. At least most would argue. Instead, it's based in your own personal sense of faith and in a cultural belief in this particular religion, right? A delusion is when you kind of have this sudden and extreme belief, typically about yourself, without any kind of clear basis in fact, right? So you could have a paranoid delusion, where you're convinced that people are after you and trying to hurt you. You could have a delusion of reference, where you think random normal things people are saying are actually about you. You could have a delusion of grandeur, where you think you're suddenly kind of this amazing person. Like maybe you're the best juggler in the world, and you think you can, take like 17 balls and juggle them simultaneously, right? But then, of course, you can. Typically, a person in that situation would maybe try to do that, then they fail, and then, of course, they start making excuses for why they can't do it. Like, oh, there's something in the air, or, oh, I just, I didn't get any sleep last night, or the balls are rigged, they must be rigged, right? So they suddenly have this belief about themselves and their abilities or what's going on with them that doesn't have any basis in reality. So hallucinations, delusions, these are the main things in psychosis. Psychosis, remember, is when you have extra stuff, usually harmful or problematic stuff, added onto your experience of reality. Whereas dissociation is kind of the inverse, or the other side of the coin to this one. With dissociation, right, what you're seeing and perceiving, what you're feeling, all that kind of stuff, is for the most part normal, right? You're seeing all the stuff, if I'm walking around and there are some trees, a bench, some dogs, people walking their dogs, some cars driving in the street, I'm seeing all that stuff and registering it, as being there to some extent, right? But my conscious experience of it, my conscious feeling about what those things are in relation to me is changed, right? So maybe I dissociate by having an out-of-body experience, right? Like I feel like, yes, Mr. Usher is walking around, there's dogs and there's benches and stuff, but I'm not Mr. Usher. I'm watching Mr. Usher do that here. I feel like I'm higher up or elsewhere. Or maybe I'm crossing the street when there are cars, and maybe a car isn't driving safely and not paying attention. But I don't feel like I'm really crossing the street. I feel like everything around me is derealized, that it doesn't have a sense of feeling real. And so it's maybe like a foggy kind of situation, or it's like feels like a video game or a movie. So if that car comes towards me, it's going to be like, uh-oh, look out. And not like I need to move, but like, if I were watching a movie and be like, hey, look out, dude, and that's dangerous. I could be hit by the car. So psychosis, you have stuff added on top, right? Disassociation, you are removed from the situation psychologically. You do not feel like you're consciously experiencing your own body in this situation, right? So those are two ways that reality can be altered. They talk more about that here in this video. We watch basically all of it, right? You can kind of cut off before the credits, but we watch basically all of that. We go over the diagnostic criterion for schizophrenia here. Talking about the main symptoms here. You need to have at least 2 of these for at least 1 month, right? So you need delusions, or hallucinations, or disorganized speech, or grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior, or negative symptoms. So in schizophrenia, as they explain in the video, there are positive and negative symptoms. Positive symptoms are typically the psychosis stuff, the stuff that is added on, right, to your perception of reality. Whereas negative symptoms also come to play as well, right? You could have a very flat affect where you're not expressing any emotion at all, no matter what happens. You could have kind of like a blunted affect where, you kind of maybe suddenly state things that are really terrible, but really in a very matter-of-fact way. Like somebody calls you and they're just like, maybe you hear your grandfather died, right? And it's normally really sad news, and you're just like, oh, my grandfather died. You could have maybe a lack of movement, right? You could have catatonia, right, where you're not moving, or maybe your body gets moved into a particular position and you just freeze there for long periods of time. You could have an inability to coordinate your language together, so you can't put words together properly, kind of disorganized speech. But yeah, positive and negative symptoms, that kind of a thing. So you have at least 2 of these for at least a month. Impairment is you have impairments in one of your areas. Mostly in the DSM, they look to distress. Are you feeling distressed by this disorder? And people with schizophrenia almost always are. And are you dysfunctional, right? Is it upsetting work, interpersonal relations, self-care? They have to be continuous over a period of 6 months, or at least some signs do. 6-month period must include at least 1 month of symptoms that meet criterion A, which is, again, like up here. And yeah, basically they can't be better expressed by another disorder, such as schizoaffective disorder, which kind of combines, say, bipolar depression with schizophrenia in a kind of a really terrible way. Anyway, that's basically what schizophrenia is. I'm not going to quiz you too much on the details of that. But then you have here probably the most famous or infamous dissociative disorder, which is dissociative identity disorder, probably most commonly known as split personality disorder or multiple personality disorder. So as you've probably heard of through TVs and movies, this is a disorder where the person, as it says here, is characterized by an identity fragmenting into two or more distinct personality states. It also correctly points out that, at least in theory, people with this condition often are the product of very severe abuse, right? Basically, the criterion are pretty simple for this one. Individual experiences two or more distinct identities or personalities, right, including, basically differences in personality that are wildly different, not just, slight changes in how you're feeling about the world. This includes changes in behavior, consciousness, memory, perception, cognition, motor function. So everything about what you do seems different, like almost like you're possessed by a different person, as it kind of suggests here, right? There are gaps in your memory, right? Because the idea is that while your other person, or your alter, as they say in clinical psychology, while your alter is in control, they're living that experience and they're remembering and encoding that experience, but you don't have access to those memories because you weren't there for that, right? So these gaps, they're not like, ordinary forgetting. It's not like, oh shoot, I forgot my keys, right? It's like, yeah, like, thinking back to it, like, what did I do for 12 hours yesterday? I have no idea, right? They have to cause clinically significant distress and impairment in social, occupational, other important areas. So distress, dysfunction. Not always dangerous, probably not dangerous. Actually, they could be, if it's kind of giving you a sense of like, oh, who am I? Where was I? What did I do? Definitely deviant. Most people just have the one personality. Anyway, big thing with this, right? Dissociative identity disorder might not even be real. We still have it in the DSM because there are still some cases that appear to be real, but many clinical psychologists question whether or not it exists at all. There are some real dissociative disorders, like dissociative fugue, where you go wandering, seemingly in a trance, and then maybe you wake up, or seemingly wake up somewhere else, maybe wearing different clothes, having stuff in your pockets, and you're like, how did I get here, right? There is dissociative amnesia, which is basically just this part, right, without any change in identity. Right, you might kind of go through a particular event kind of in something of a fog. Like you're acting apparently normally, but you're in something of a fog, and you have huge gaps in memory that, are beyond kind of the normal range of forgetting, as it says. And then there is, what is the one I'm forgetting? There's depersonalization, derealization disorder, where the person kind of feels like separate from themselves, right? They feel like they're a different person than who they are. And or they feel like the reality around them is kind of like a fog, right? So kind of classic dissociation like I described earlier. So, psychosis, disassociation, hopefully you get that one. I went over some answers to the DIN earlier in the class. I can go over those really quick if you guys want. There's a ticket out the door that asks you to differentiate these two concepts, psychosis and dissociation. Let me just really quick try to go for these here. So, for this one, oh, no, that's the ticket. I want the DIN. Shoot. All right, we're back. So I'm just going to give you the answers to this particular DIN because a lot of it was stuff we unfortunately weren't able to cover. First one, you should already know because we definitely did cover this. Difference between fear and anxiety. Fear is immediate. Anxiety is focusing on things that might happen, right? So it's this third one here. This one, right, with obsessive compulsive disorder, which we didn't get to dive into as thoroughly as I wanted to. We did talk about it, but not very thoroughly. People are often obsessed with a particular kind of thought. These are intrusive thoughts, right? So they feel like they're invading your brain and you can't get them out. Panic disorder is characterized by these things, blank, blank. Probably heard of this before, a panic attack. So, there. And SSRIs are one common way to treat both depression and anxiety. Another way is with a medication called benzodiazepines. They basically make you tired, right? So they're actually used in hospitals to actually put people to sleep in some cases. But yeah, if you're really keyed up and overly anxious, right, taking something to calm you down might help. That's it, right? I just went over the DIN, which is all these questions about anxiety disorders. Ticket out the door is you writing about the difference between psychosis and dissociation. Have at it. Ask questions if you need to. Otherwise, bye.